This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, after moving to the UK from Kochi in Japan over 25 years ago, our next guest missed the taste of home and started making sushi with local ingredients.
Yes, Tomo Davis went on to establish Tomo Sushi Party, inspired by her mother's dedication to cooking fresh meals every day.
Now, while sushi is usually enjoyed in restaurants in Japan, Tomo is showing that anyone can create it at home. So here we go. She's already taught over 500 people and is now bringing her passion to even more people.
So she joins us now in the studio to give us one of her sushi masterclasses. First of all, we're a little bit nervous. We're certainly not pros. I love eating sushi, but certainly not making it.
As long as you follow my instruction, it should be that easy.
OK, great. That's what we like to hear.
So tell us a little bit about your business and why we're here today.
Of course. So my name is Tomo Davis. I'm originally from the place called Kochi, as you mentioned, and I'm the founder and owner of Tomo Sushi Party. So we bring authentic, hands-on sushi making classes to homes, offices in London and home counties. Also, we run public classes, the information which you can find on my website.
Yep.
So this goes all the way back in 90s, actually, when I was a student.
Never.
The Japanese food wasn't widely available, but I really craved a beautiful, aromatic aged sushi, Japanese food. And when you're craving something, you started making your own at home. And I fell in love with the Englishman. He brought me back to UK. Then that's the time more people start asking me, can you teach me how to make sushi?
The People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show here on GB News. Lovely to be with you this morning. I'm going to be joined by Matthew Pennycook. He's the Housing and Planning Minister. I'm going to be asking him whether the government can meet its housing targets and how it plans to accommodate nearly 5 million new migrants by 2032. I'll also, of course, be asking him about the Andrew Gwynn scandal. Let's call it that, because it certainly is. I'm also going to be joined by Alex Burghart. He's the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, basically Kemi Badenoch's sort of de facto deputy. I'm going to be asking him about her plans for limiting legal migration and what he makes of reports of a mega deal between Nigel Farage and, wait for it, Boris Johnson. Former Tory MP, now she's a Reform Greater Lincolnshire mayoral candidate, Andrea Jenkyns, joins me. I also want to ask her about the mega pact because she knows Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson very well. Is there anything in that Mail on Sunday story? I'm going to be speaking to Britain's strictest headmistress, Katharine Birbalsingh, head of Michaela Academy in Wembley. She's going to join me to discuss this ongoing row with the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson. Expect some fireworks with that. And as the Bank of England downgrades its growth projections for the British economy, I'm going to be speaking to the business leader, Sir Rocco Forte, about the impact Rachel Reeves's budget is having on small and medium-sized businesses. As ever, we've got 90 minutes of very punchy politics ahead, so do not think of going anywhere. But first, with me now to review the Sunday front pages is former BBC broadcaster Nicholas Owen. Nicholas, as I live and breathe, what a set of papers we have this morning, starting with the Mail on Sunday's astonishing expose of, let's be honest, the most insulting, offensive and incendiary WhatsApp messages we've seen in quite some time.
Absolutely. Andrew Gwynn is the man, a health minister now sacked for what he has said, very probably by Keir Starmer. I think everybody would say that was the right thing to do, certainly. I'll tell you what I think about this. This is this social media. Is it a WhatsApp group or something or other group or whatever, this man? And he launched himself at all sorts of targets which he shouldn't have done, saying some pensioner, I think, hoping some pensioner would die because they hadn't voted for them because this pensioner had complained about bin collection and that. But also going on about people like Diana Abbott and being a fairly racist remark about her.
Racist remarks about Jews.
Jews as well.
About David Lammy.
Everything that you would think that a sensible politician of any party would keep away from, this man has dropped right in. I mean, if you read right the way through, he does have a sort of history of, some people talk about depression and things like that, but I think this is just extraordinary to me. But doesn't it show the dangers? I've said this on your show before, haven't I? About these channels, these platforms, whatever you call them, they are just lethal. But you tend to think of young people falling into the mistake of saying all sorts of silly things and so on.
This is a grown man.
Man,
it's an elected representative. And also there's another Labour MP on there. There's a load of Labour councillors. It does beg the question, why did you all think this kind of rhetoric was OK? And for Keir Starmer, this is so problematic, isn't it? Because he's the one who says that he has purged all anti-Semitism from the party. Others have been suspicious about whether you can actually do that, because some people in the hard left are still anti-Semitic, and yet you get messages like this, like casually bandied around. It's like, oh, is that the thinking of quite a lot of people in Labour? This is not good.
Yes, I know. It's awful, isn't it? He does say something about apologising, you know, misjudgment.
Yeah, but I don't know about these apologies. I'm sorry if I have caused offence. Why not say what I said was categorically completely wrong and out of order? I'll ask Matthew Pennycook when he comes on later, the Housing Minister. Does this guy actually have a role in Parliament at all? Should he be able to remain an MP, even as an independent, if this is the way he talks about his constituents?
Yeah, absolutely. And can't party leaders just say, just stop doing it, you know?
I can't help but think if this was a Tory and the Labour were attacking them, they'd be saying that this guy needs to be booted out of the Houses of Parliament altogether. Let's move on to the Sunday Times have spoken with two of... So B.B. King and Elsie's parents have spoken. Elsie Stancombe's parents have spoken for the very first time to the Sunday Times. And, I mean, I did have a tear in my eye reading this in the car on the way here, Nick.
This is heartbreaking. This is absolutely heartbreaking stuff.
And they've made an interesting point in this piece. I do urge people to just read their first-hand testimony of, you know, how they got the girls into the dance group, how they heard the news, how they were treated when they then approached the scene, taped off by the police. It is literally every parent's abject worst nightmare. But they've made an interesting point that I think merits some discussion. The judge in the case, obviously now sentencing is filmed. The whole case isn't filmed like it is in America, but the sentencing is filmed. And the judge was pretty explicit about the injuries that were sustained by BB and Elsie. And they're saying, was it necessary to have gone into that detail? We don't want our little girls remembered for the crime. We want them to be remembered for what they were like in life. And I read that as a parent, and I had quite a lot of sympathy with it, actually.
Yes, I think you're right, because if there'd been a trial, if this the wretched individual whose name I don't even want past my lips, if he'd have pleaded not guilty, they'd have had to sit through so much terrible stuff. But I think what people didn't quite realise was the judge, in the summing up, had to go through sort of the reasons why this man was in the dock, this young person was in the dock in the first place. So very sadly, that's the detail you get. But it's a bit of a balance, isn't it? We seem to want to get cameras and so on, coverage of these things in the courtroom. I've never been quite sure what purpose it serves, frankly, because you're still not allowed to film the trial, you're still not allowed to see the defendant and so on. Seems like it was a bit unnecessary. But this is heartbreaking stuff. If you're going to have a look at the Sunday Times or follow up this morning, I would recommend every parent in the country, take it steady, because you are going to feel It's just awful.
But
just
also,
awful.
I like the fact that these lovely new images of these girls have appeared on the front pages so that we're not remembering them in the context. No. The parents are saying, please do not remember our daughters in the context of the crime. Remember them for the lives that they led. And I thought it was an extremely touching, very well-executed interview. I think they spoke to the parents. The journalist, let's just name him. Who is it? It's the Northern editor, David.
David Collins, his
name is. And he spoke to them for 3 hours, and he's done a very, very good job with that interview. Very difficult interview. Yeah. Moving on to, well, completely different political fare. Again, in the Mail on Sunday, Farage paves way for reform Tory mega party with Boris that would trounce stumbling Starmer. Tell me more, Nick.
Well, the talk is that this is the way forward. Let's see, Reform are polling very well at the moment. I think they're ahead of both the other parties, aren't they now?
But they're all kind of a third, a third, a third. So somebody needs to do the running here and get very further ahead. With a figure beginning with a 3, basically, to win the next election.
You spend more time in Mr Farage's company than I do. What do you think?
Well...
Is it possible? I mean, to me...
I think he gets on with Boris, but he feels very let down by 2019 and this idea that Reform, or then the Brexit party, stood aside and then Boris didn't deliver on his post-Brexit pledges. Yes. I think he's got a not very good relationship at all with Kemi Badenoch, which makes things difficult. You remember the row they had about membership numbers?
Yes.
He might be natural. What I found interesting about this story is this is about Reform allies meeting up with Robert Jenrick allies. They say neither man sanctioned the meeting, but I do find it interesting, and I shall put this to Alex Burghart later as Kemi's right-hand man. It's a bit worrying that Jenrick types are trying to do deals with Reform.
Yes.
Rather undermines Badenoch's authority.
There's no way that any leader of a party is going to say, I say, let's go and have a chat with this other lot, especially when you've got a character like Nigel Farage. He's going to want to be... He wants to be Prime Minister. He wants to be out the front there. So there's no way that they're just going to have a job. I say, who's going to do a better job? It's not going to be like that. Farage is a bulldozer.
Well, they're talking about Farage accepting the role of Chancellor here and Boris would be Prime Minister. I don't think it...
No.
Whenever I've spoken to anyone in Reform, sort of off the record, it's, even Tories accept this, by the way. If the numbers continue as they are, the Tories are the junior partner in any of these sorts of pacts or relationships, right?
Yes.
So, but then... It would be appealing, would it not, to right-wing voters to have some kind of dream team mash-up of robust right-wing Tories and Reform?
Do you see Boris and Nigel getting on together well enough to get through a cabinet?
They always did get on, but can we see Boris Johnson defecting from the Conservatives to Reform?
Yeah. Can you see them... No, but can you see them around the cabinet table together? Can you see them sort of running the country together or sort of? I don't see that at all.
Be an interesting journalistic prospect. I always see these things through the prism of journalism rather than... what would be good for journalism? Oh, this would be interesting.
Great story, but come on, let's be real. Can we talk? Have we got time to talk about another leader of the Western world?
Yes. Should we talk about Trump's comments about Meghan? Listen, you gasped when you were reading this earlier.
Yes. This is really awful. This is terrible. Trump saying that he feels sorry for poor old Prince Harry, that he won't make sure that he's not deported for failing to declare that he had taken a few naughty things in his time.
He said that in spare.
Not supposed to allowed into the US on those circumstances.
Don't put that on your immigration form, Harry.
Absolutely. No. But then he turns around and says, I feel sorry for him because Meghan is terrible. I mean, any political leader to talk in that way about another individual is just... Some of what Trump has done in the last few weeks, I'm sure most of us say to ourselves, oh, God, this man. But, I quite agree with him on that. But this is lower than the...
Fair.
This is completely unfair and completely
invective.
ghastly. Yes. What on earth is he doing talking about somebody else's marriage? A man who we all know, it's very, very wide, his own behaviour towards...
Yes, perhaps he's not the best person to comment, because he had previously... He's recently said she's terrible, but then he had previously said that he felt that Prince Harry was, quote, whipped and that the marriage wouldn't last.
Yeah, that's... Again, what an appalling thing to say. Utterly appalling.
Also, I suppose the bad thing for the couple as well is it's overshadowing the fact that it's the opening of the Invictus, I think. They're meant to be there, obviously doing that initiative with wounded ex-service personnel, and it's been overshadowed. But that is what happens when Trump speaks.
He does. It comes straight out, doesn't it? There, as I said, no filter. There's no filter at all. And we got 4 years of this.
Well, hang on. Again, in the interest of journalism, Nicholas...
you keep coming back to this as if I'm sort of somehow, outside of
No, I'm not at all suggesting that. No, I'm saying that my approach to these things is always very cynical and seen through the lens of headlines. You have to admit that his first 3 weeks in office have been, as the Americans might say... In fact, this was a word that was used by the former communications chief to the Sussexes. Impactful.
That's right, yeah. There certainly have been that, yes. I agree. I agree with that.
Nicholas Owen, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning.
Pleasure
as ever. As I say, coming up next, I'm going to be speaking to Labour's Housing and Planning Minister Matthew Pennycook. But first, if you're in search of some winter sun, if only, then here's the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
You may well be thinking of escaping the cloudy skies of the UK and heading to the Mediterranean, though it is rather mixed out there at the moment. There are some heavy showers and thunderstorms across parts of Malta and Sicily, though recent snowfall across the Alps should hopefully help with some skiing conditions. Perhaps the most settled conditions across parts of southern Iberia, Portugal and Spain, though there is some showery rain pushing into parts of Madeira as well. Generally, it is going to be the west that holds on to the most settled conditions during this week as well.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Aaron McLean, the goal machine here, used to play for Peterborough United. You bagged loads of goals for them back in the day. But I've got a bone to pick with you, young man. You scored at the City ground against Nottingham Forest for, was it Hull City?
For Hull City, yeah.
Why did you do that?
Well, that was my job, unfortunately. I must say, that was actually one of my favourite goals.
Was it really?
Because I remember, obviously, playing at the City ground, unbelievable stadium, historic.
It is great.
So, and we beat you 1-0.
OK, no need to rubbish it. These sports clubs, whether it's football or rugby or whatever, should offer two alternatives, either a professional footballer, or if you don't quite make it, you can still go and play football at a lower level, but have a career as well, maybe be an electrician or a plumber.
100%. You know, listen, I've had multiple conversations with various different people, whether it's the PFA or whether it's clubs. Even players who do have careers, you know, there's so many that don't make it and don't quite make it to the level or only play at a lower level. There's so many that do have long careers, but once you come to the end of that, you've spent, you know, for me, I spent 20 years as a professional footballer. Once I finished playing, what do you then do for the rest of your life? You know, at 35, once you retire, you still have to have a purpose in life. Yeah. But I'd almost be starting from ground zero. I'm fortunate that I went into coaching and then went into the media.
That's good.
But for every one of me, there's hundreds that don't. And I've got so many friends who, I've got to say, you know, have really, really struggled on the, you know, mental health side.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, because you go from, like, playing in stadiums, big stadiums, small stadiums, crowds, singing your name, and all that sort of stuff, that adulation, the buzz of winning games, and, you know, the downs of losing games, and you go from that to sort of nothing when you finish. I mean, that's a big come down there.
It's a huge come down.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Labour's Housing and Planning Minister Matthew Pennycook joins me now. Good morning, Minister. Thank you very much indeed for joining me on GB News.
My pleasure.
We talk about Andrew Gwynn? And I do think the Prime Minister deserves credit for immediately sacking him from government and suspending him over these extraordinary WhatsApp messages. But my question is, genuinely, should any MP who messages Dear resident, F your bins. I'm re-elected and without your vote, screw you. P.S. Hopefully you'll have croaked it by the all-outs, which mean the local elections. Should that person be able to remain in Parliament at all? He shouldn't be able to continue to be an MP, Labour, Independent or anything.
Well, you're absolutely right, Camilla. The comments made by Andrew Gwynn are completely unacceptable. And I appreciate you giving credit to the Prime Minister for acting decisively as he has. He's been very clear since the time we entered office that this is going to be a government that upholds the highest standards of conduct in public life. We're a government in service of working people. So we've taken decisive action to dismiss Andrew Gwynn as a minister, as is the case. There's a live investigation going on in terms of the Labour Party. Andrew Gwynn's been administratively suspended. He's lost the Labour whip. I don't know what was said in those WhatsApp groups. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment in any case.
But we do know. But we do know. Hang on, though, Minister. We do know what's been said. I mean, obviously, the Mail on Sunday has published the worst of this. In response to a question about whether a man called Marshall Rosenberg will be at a particular meeting, he replies, "No, he sounds too militaristic and too Jewish. Is he in Mossad?" Now, I'm sorry, we've had a situation where Keir Starmer has sought praise for purging the party of anti-Semitism post-Corbyn, and yet you've got a minister using this language. This should be a no-brainer at this point, and I appreciate there's an investigation being carried out, but we've already got a load of the messages literally in black and white in front of us. So my question to you is, in what world can this man remain an MP?
Well, we have got a series of the quotes from the WhatsApp messages as part of that splash this morning. I don't have the full transcripts that I've seen, but I think you viewers will accept that it would be inappropriate for me to speculate on what comes next when there is a live investigation taking place. But
What's your instinct? Because you're a Labour MP that wants the party to appear respectable. Would you say personally that really there's no place back into the party for Andrew Gwynn? We've got a suspension right now. He's not been booted out of the party completely. He should be, though, shouldn't he?
Well, his membership of the party has been administratively suspended. He's lost the Labour whip, and the Prime Minister has acted very decisively to ensure that's the case and that he was dismissed as a minister, because we're very clear those comments are completely unacceptable. But I'm not going to speculate on his future standing, whether he stands again for any of those other hypotheticals while that live investigation is taking place.
If you were Andrew Gwynn at this point, would you just resign? Resign from the House of Commons and say, look, I can't represent my constituents anymore?
It's a complete hypothetical. I'm not Andrew Gwynn. I wouldn't use language.
I know, but I'm asking for your opinion, Minister, which is a perfectly fair question to ask on a Sunday morning, that this scandal has broken.
But I don't think it is appropriate while there's an ongoing live investigation to speculate on hypotheticals as what might happen to Andrew Gwynn.
How disturbed are you that this group also involved another Labour MP and Labour councillors who don't seem to have called these messages out?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you know, Camilla. I don't know who released the transcript of that WhatsApp. I don't know the circumstances in which this information have come to light. Again, I don't think it would be appropriate, not personally knowing the full details, for me to comment on hypotheticals, on speculation, when there is this live investigation. I think your viewers, as I've said, draw comfort from the fact that both in terms of the Labour Party having that administrative suspension, the removal of the whip, and Andrew Gwynn's dismissal as a minister, that the government is determined to uphold the highest standards in public life and to act decisively across the board. It doesn't matter who the minister is or who the member of parliament is.
I know, but final question on this, because I do want to get onto housing. It's really important to the GB News audience. But from what we know already, barring an investigation, doesn't it suggest to you we've got misogyny, we've got racism, we've got anti-Semitism, and we've got wishing a constituent dead? This man has no place in Parliament. That must be your natural instinct. It's my instinct.
And I don't think I can be any clearer than I have been, Camilla, that language is completely unacceptable.
So he shouldn't be in the House of Commons for a minute longer. He should be permanently expelled from the Labour Party and expelled from Parliament. That's what most people watching and listening to this will be thinking right now, Mr. Pennycook.
And I can understand why they would be thinking that. I'm not going to prejudge or predetermine that investigation that has just taken place overnight.
Let's get on to housing. The Centre for Cities has warned that Labour will miss its pledge of 1.5 million new homes by 2029 by at least 388,000 homes. So are you going to meet that 1.5 million pledge? Can you give us a cast-iron guarantee that pledge will be met?
We are confident that that target can be met. It is an incredibly stretching target, and I think we deliberately chose it for that reason. And I just put to your view as the counterfactual, we could have picked fairly easy target that we know we could have comfortably met, could have picked the previous government's target of building just under 1 million homes over a parliament. That wouldn't have been commensurate with the scale of the housing crisis that this country is in the grip of. You know, that won't deal with the fact that a generation is locked out of home ownership, that we've got 1.3 million people languishing on social housing waiting lists, that we've got, to our shame as a country, 160,000 children right now homeless in temporary accommodation. So yes, it's a stretching target, it's challenging. We've got to take reform across the board. It's got to be reform and investment. It's a set menu, if you like, not a la carte.
Yes.
We've got to do everything. We're working at pace to do that. But if we are confident we can meet the target.
In that case, you say you've got 1.3 million on housing waiting lists. Why on earth isn't Labour doing more to bring immigration down really, really considerably? Because we've got an ONS prediction that the population is going to go up to 72.5 million by 2032. 4.9 million of that is going to be made up by migrants. So actually, the maths don't add up on your housing targets. You're not going to have nearly enough homes built by 2032.
I would just gently push back on those ONS figures. I think they take trends baked in under the previous government. And you will know that between 2019 and 2024, migration doubled, reached nearly 1 million points in single years. That is unsustainable. We've been very clear that we've got to restore order to the asylum and immigration system. We've got to bring levels of net migration down. And in doing so, we will take pressure off the housing system. We're not going to set arbitrary targets like the previous government did that are not achieved.
Well, why can't you just set a target that is achieved?
There's no point picking arbitrary targets. We're very clear on our commitment to bring down levels of net migration. But Camilla, what I'd sort of say...
literally by how many? But even if you don't bring down a target, just give me a rough figure. I've asked Yvette Cooper this, the Home Secretary. She can't answer either. How is the electorate to have any confidence in what Labour's saying if you won't even give us a ballpark? 100,000, 500,000, 900,000? Just give us an estimation.
But I think the electorate, I don't know about you, I think the electorate are tired of politicians pulling out these arbitrary figures on migration and not meeting them. They should judge us by our actions. The number of removals since we took office over 16,000, enforced returns up 24% since July, foreign criminals being deported in large numbers. They should judge us by our actions rather than some arbitrary target. I think they've had enough of that under the last Labour government. But we are
don't you think the electorate is moving closer to reform, who are now ahead in all of the polls because reform have been really clear on net zero migration? Don't you think that's how the electorate is reacting to 14 years of Tory rule and Labour ambivalence on immigration numbers?
I just, I'm afraid, fundamentally reject that we are ambivalent on numbers. We are very clear.
Well, you won't give me a number. That's why you're being ambivalent. If you were being unequivocal, you'd give me a figure.
No, I'm not going to pick out an arbitrary number from the air live on Sunday morning television that when, you know, in the way that the previous government did. I think people have lost confidence in that type of approach. They should judge us on our commitment to bring down levels of...
You're saying, I think... But they've lost confidence in politicians because you're saying you won't set a target because no politician seems to be able to meet a target. And then you're wondering why people have lost faith in politics. How it should work is you set a target and you meet it. And then the electorate says, thank you very much, you've honoured a manifesto pledge.
And we'll set out further details in due course. There's a white paper coming that will evidence the way we think we can bring down levels of net migration. As I've said, a number of evidence points that shows how serious we are on the numbers of deportations taking place, on enforced returns. That is a clear direction of travel that this government are going in. But I come back to the point on housing, Camilla. Even if levels of net migration were not what they were under the previous Conservative government, even if those trends weren't being extrapolated forward, we'd still need to build houses in huge numbers of all tenures, because for decades in this country, we have not built enough homes for our people. So removing net migration from the equation, you'd still have to build in large numbers, is why we're so determined to meet this 1.5 million new homes target, because a situation where we've got, as I've said, 160,000 children homeless right now in temporary accommodation, that a target, much less ambitious target, million or whatever it might be, would not be enough to meet that challenge.
Thank you, Minister. We just have to leave it there for time reasons, but thank you so much for your time this morning. Great to speak to you. Lots more to come on the Camilla Tominey Show today, including Alex Burghart, Kemi Badenoch's right-hand man, on that mega deal. Let's see what he has to say. See you in just a jiffy.
We're doubling your chances to win in our latest Great British giveaway, with 2 fabulous prize bundles up for grabs. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. And the best news is 2 lucky winners are going to win. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
As we kick off 2025, many of us might be thinking about a bit of a wardrobe refresh, especially if you're over 50 and you feel like the high street doesn't quite cater to you.
Indeed. That's where our next guest, Mel Tillett, comes in. She's in the studio with us now.
Mel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I love that you are this accidental influencer. I love that you said that's the first time.
Yeah, it is. That's the first time I've heard it.
You can have that for free on
thank
TV.
you so much. It's quite true.
Tell us about your following. Obviously, an influencer that many people might typically think of would be someone in their teens, someone in their 20s, someone who's particularly social media savvy, using TikTok. Talk to us about your brand of influencer.
Well, our influencer, my kind of influence is over the older age group, the over 50s. For my business, I do a lot of live videos. I do them early in the morning at 7:30, which sounds ridiculous, but I know my ladies are up and about at that time having a cup of coffee or whatever that might be. And just being honest about day-to-day life. So my dogs are running about, my grandchildren are even sometimes in them, one thing and another. So it's just been purely by accident that I've got this really nice, loyal following, and I get lovely messages off ladies. I'll do things like, I'll tell them when I'm going for a mammogram, and I'll say, come on, everybody go for your mammogram.
That's brilliant.
All sort of health-conscious things. I've been a lot heavier than I am now, and I've slimmed down and lost some weight. I've been talking about that journey as well. And then ladies will ask me questions on the videos, and we chat about all sorts of different things. And now I'm getting messages every day, and people are loving the clothing ranges that we do. And it's just, I started off as a business, that's purely what I did, but it's turned out into this other, I get recognised places I go now, which is really weird.
It must be a huge benefit to your business as well.
We employ around about 50 people.
Wow.
And I'm quite open to my audience and saying, while ever you keep buying off us, while ever you're loving our products and our clothing, you're keeping 50 people in jobs.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show here on GB News. Next, I'm going to be joined by Kemi Badenoch's right-hand man, Alex Burghart. He's the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Plus, I'll be joined by former Tory MP turned Reform mayoral candidate Dame Andrea Jenkyns, close to Boris Johnson. Going to be asking her about that story about a pact with Nigel Farage. And polish your shoes, straighten your ties. Britain's strictest headmistress, Katharine Birbalsingh, will join me in the studio to discuss her ongoing war of words with the Education Secretary. And business leader Sir Rocco Forte will be joining me to discuss Britain's low-growth economic future. But first, here's your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Camilla, thank you. Good morning. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. It's 10 o'clock. 5 Thai men held hostage in Gaza for over a year have arrived back in their homeland. There were tears of joy at Bangkok airport as the men reunited with their families and said they feel so grateful. The men, aged 27 to 36, were released by Hamas on the 30th of January as part of a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. It comes a day after they handed over 3 Israeli hostages whose gaunt appearance shocked Israelis, and Israel freed dozens of Palestinian prisoners. Back in the UK, the Prime Minister has sacked one of his health ministers over offensive comments he's reported to have made in a WhatsApp group. Andrew Gwynn has also been suspended as a member of the Labour Party and has since apologised for what he calls misjudged comments. It follows an exposé by the Mail on Sunday claiming Mr Gwynn reportedly made anti-Semitic comments and joked about a pensioner constituent, saying he hoped she died before the next election. It's also alleged that he attacked members of his own party, including making racist slights towards Labour MP Diane Abbott and sexist comments towards Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner. In other news, the parents of 2 girls killed in the Southport knife attack say they're looking for light in the darkness. Speaking to the Sunday Times, 7-year-old Ellie Stankoom and 6-year-old BB King's families remembered their daughters as confident, happy and intelligent. They opened up about their children's funerals and the support of the community in the months since that horrendous attack. Alice da Silva Aguiar also lost her life. Prince Harry and Meghan cheered and clapped as the United Kingdom's team walked on the stage for the opening ceremony of the Invictus Games in Canada. The couple arrived in Vancouver yesterday for the 7th edition of the Games that were established by Prince Harry in 2014. Their public appearance comes just hours after Donald Trump confirmed he won't move to deport the Duke of Sussex. Speaking in an interview, the US president said, "I'll leave him alone. He's got enough problems with his wife." Meanwhile, it's been reported Donald Trump has confirmed that he's talked to Vladimir Putin on the phone to discuss ending the war in Ukraine. According to the Telegraph newspaper, the US president said he believes that the Russian leader does care about the number of people being killed. Mr. Trump told the New York Post Putin doesn't want to see people dying. In the interview, which the newspaper said took place on board Air Force One on Friday, Mr. Trump said that he had better not say when asked how many times the 2 leaders have spoken, but confirmed they maintain a good relationship. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Camilla.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Lots more still to come on the show, including Katharine Birbalsingh and Sir Rocco Forte. But first, I'm joined by the Shadow Chancellor of Duchy of Lancaster and Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Alex Burghart. Burghart, lovely to see you this morning. Can I just discuss with you this Andrew Gwynn scandal? Because I have put it to Matthew Pennycook and he said we need an investigation. We've seen enough messages already, haven't we? Shouldn't this bloke be expelled from Parliament and there be a by-election in Gorton and Denton?
Yeah, I think there probably should be, Camilla. I mean, I noticed on your headlines, I think the worst thing that I've seen Mr Gwynn say on that group was that one gentleman was too Jewish. Now,
yes.
Keir Starmer claims that he's gotten on top of this problem in the Labour Party, but he clearly hasn't. We need to know who else was on that group. Did they call Andrew Gwynn out when he said that? If not, what sanctions are going to be taken against them? You know, we need all of this out in the open as quickly as possible, because otherwise it's the same old Labour, same old anti-Semitism within the left in this country, and you know, it shows that Labour hasn't changed at all.
So, Mr Burghart, can I just confirm you are calling on Andrew Gwynn to resign from Parliament?
I don't see how, given what he said, I don't see how his position is tenable.
OK. Let's move on to Kemi Badenoch's suggestion that jobless and low-paid migrants should be banned from securing indefinite leave to remain. Why are you saying that?
So, at the moment, there is a big surge coming through the immigration system. And if the government doesn't do something very quickly, what will happen is that a large number of people will be eligible to apply for indefinite leave to remain. And that means that they'll be eligible for benefits and access to social security and so on. What we're saying is that the government needs to extend that period from 5 years to 10 years, and that those people who then get indefinite leave to remain after that time will have a further 5 years before they can apply for British citizenship. And the reason we're doing that, Camilla, is first to deal with these numbers, unprecedented numbers, but also to re-establish that having UK citizenship is something very precious. It's not something that should be handed out easily. It's something that should be we should all consider to be incredibly important.
But won't the electorate turn around and say this all happened on your watch? You've got this massive surge. We now have the prediction that a quarter of the UK population will be foreign-born in 2035. You can say, well, it all started with Blair, but the trouble is that the Tories gave it rocket boosters, didn't they?
Look, Camilla, as I think I've said on your show before, the last government made mistakes, and that's why it's not the government anymore. We are under new leadership, and Kemi has made it very clear that the government needs to act now to make sure that we have a much better scheme for dealing with people who are already in the country. But also, she said last year, as you'll recall, that the next Conservative government will have a hard cap on the number of work visas it hands out in the first place. We are coming forward with new policies. This is a new team, and we are going to be holding the Labour government to account this week because their Borders and Security Bill is coming before the House of Commons. We are going to put down amendments to make sure that Labour has the opportunity to do the right thing.
Why not just say net zero migration like Reform? We've
said that we would have a cap. Look, the whole thing about net zero, Camilla, is that there are a lot of people, British people, who are leaving the country at the moment to work abroad, partially because of the damage that Labour Party is doing to the economy. And I don't want those people to leave the country. I want us to get some of the 9.3 million working age people who are on benefits back into work, which would be better for them and better for the British economy. I want to make sure that our country has an economy that's growing properly again. And you'll have seen that growth figures this week were slashed from 1.5% to 0.75% because of the disastrous steps that Rachel Reeves took in her budget last year. So this is all part of a package that the Conservatives are putting together to make sure that in the next Parliament we can have a sensible policy on immigration and a proper growth policy that will benefit everyone in our country.
But what's the point of announcing a cap on the number of visas being granted if you aren't going to tell us what it is? What's the number?
Kemi said that we would announce that before the next election, and it's going to be very, very much lower than the numbers. So it'll be very, very much lower than the figures that we have at the moment.
What do we think it will be approximately?
Camilla, I've said that we would announce this before the next election, and we will.
All right, well, that's 4 years away. I mean, surely now you've got Reform literally nipping at your heels. In fact, you're nipping at their heels. They're ahead of you in the polls. They've said net zero migration. They've laid it out really clearly. Well, all of the polls last week, the poll of polls, let's look at that one, puts Reform ahead of the Conservatives. And any talk of any deal appears to see the Conservatives as the junior partner to Nigel Farage.
Some polls have us up, some polls have us down. Anyone who's obsessing about polls 4 years out from an election, quite frankly, Camilla, needs to get a life. There is an enormous amount of time between now and then. Obviously, the electoral space for us is very competitive at the moment, and that's why we're coming forward with very serious, considered policies. But as I said to you, on net zero, the idea of net zero immigration, if 1 million skilled British workers leave and 1 million unskilled people come in from abroad, that would meet the criteria of net zero, but it would be a terrible thing for the country, wouldn't it?
OK. Mr Burghart, do you think that people are mad then? We have reports that some sources close to Robert Jenrick have met some sources close to Nigel Farage and discussed a mega pact between Farage and bringing back Boris Johnson in a bid to unite the right. Are the people who got involved in those talks at a Mayfair private members club last week, are they deluded?
I haven't heard anything about that, Camilla.
Well, it's in the Mail on Sunday. I've just told you the details.
Reform. I thank you very much for telling me. I have to say that Reform has stated that its intention is to try and kill the Conservative Party. I don't think that that's a very sort of constructive basis for talks between parties. We've got an excellent new leader, and I'm confident that she can win us a majority at the next election, and that's what I'm focusing on as Conservative MP.
So what are you saying? You don't want to bring back Boris Johnson?
I want Kemi Badenoch, who we only elected 3 months ago, to lead us into the next election and win that election for us, as I know she can.
Yes, and yet a YouGov poll just out, I saw it before I came on air today, says 48 to 26% of Conservative voters say Kemi doesn't look like a Prime Minister in waiting. That's a bit disturbing, isn't it, as we mark 100 days of Kemi Badenoch in office on Monday?
Camilla, you have met Kemi and you know just how talented a woman she is and what enormous potential she has to change our politics and deliver the sort of economic and social change that this country needs. I have every confidence that over the next 4 years she will show that to the British public and that they will vote for her come 2029.
All right, Alex Burghart, I know you have other interviews to do, so I'll leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for joining us on GB News today.
Cheers.
Thank you. Still to come, Katharine Birbalsingh will join me in the studio to discuss her war of words with the Education Secretary. But first, Dame Andrea Jenkyns is going to be joining me. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News. Stay tuned. Be back in just a jiffy.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And fashionistas are keen to see which new trends are set to hit the catwalk.
Well, our next guest is very well placed to share her predictions with us after being a contestant on hit ITV series Dress the Nation, as well as being an upcycling and sewing consultant.
Wow. Joining us now is Tendai Murewa. I want to go back to you appearing on the ITV Dress the Nation.
Right.
Tell us about that experience. What was that like?
Oh, that was one of my highlights as an upcycling consultant. I learned to sew in my kitchen 5 years ago. And then, you know, during COVID, just making masks. Then the next thing I was on a Dress the Nation, making dresses in front of TV. Yeah, it was just incredible. I think we all had all these clothes that we have, but we don't know what to do with them. So mainly I started with men's jackets, taking off the sleeves and putting it like a print on.
I've tried this. I've tried taking off my sleeves before. I now have about 3 jackets with no sleeves. I never managed to put them back on.
You need to come to a workshop. You need to come to a workshop.
I need an upcycling consultant. 2025, what can we expect fashion-wise?
I think bold prints are back. People are loving. I think you walk on the streets in frollos and oversized men's jackets.
So the exact opposite. We have drastically underperformed this morning. You're just saying not like us.
We just woke up this morning and thought it's winter, it's cold, it's grey.
Grey, miserable.
Is that not the way to go?
No, it is. I think because fashion is expressive. It's whatever you want to express yourself. You know?
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News. Joining me now is the former Tory MP turned Reform Greater Lincolnshire mayoral candidate, Dame Andrea Jenkyns. Dame Andrea, lovely to see you today. Let me read you out the introduction to a story on page 5 of the Mail on Sunday, written by Glenn Owen, the political editor. Nigel Farage is prepared to work with Boris Johnson to defeat Labour in the national interest. Sources close to the Reform UK leader have told the Mail on Sunday. Discuss.
This is just fake news, Camilla. Look, I know Boris, I know Robert, they're both friends. I know Nigel, he's a friend. And this just has not happened. Or if it is, it's somebody so remote who doesn't have any authority. And look, we don't even know if Boris wants to come back onto the front line of politics. Nigel has already said we are pushing to form a majority government. And so what I actually think this is Camilla, is this is Kemi's team briefing the media to make out that, number one, because they're behind in the polls, so to make it out that Robert is trying to do a deal that Nigel cannot get a government in his own right, and to try and discredit Robert. And I did see it myself when I was in government, Camilla. I remember, when I was a Conservative, I remember a story being briefed, and I asked Boris and Kerry about this, where it said that Rishi had come out and said that Boris he'd rang and spoke to Boris and he was going to help him campaign, and no such phone call happened. So we know that leaders of the opposition, governments, they do brief stuff like this, and I think it's a deflection tactic, and it is, I'm afraid, fake news, Camilla.
OK, but do you think there's ever a chance that Boris Johnson might follow in your footsteps and defect to Reform?
I don't think so, to be honest. I mean, I'm not sure he wants to come back onto the front line of politics, to be honest with you, Camilla. So, no, I don't think he'd do it for either party.
No, OK, fair enough. But don't you agree that if it does look as if the vote is split on the right, that right-wing voters will really be wanting the Tories and Reform to come together, because they will consider that there's a fate worse than a split on the right, and that's another 4 years of Labour?
Look, I mean, I tried to do that before the general election, as you know, Camilla. I spoke with Rishi, I spoke with Reform, trying to bring them both together. But we was in a different place in the polls then, and look at where we are now as the Reform Party. I mean, consistently, we're beating Labour and Conservatives, and we're 4 years away from an election. So I think anything's possible. Yes, if the push come to the shove and, we can't form a majority, we might need to look at that. But we're 4 years away. We've got 4 years to actually build on this massive momentum. We've got nearly 200,000 members already now, which is trouncing the Conservatives. So I think the only way is up, actually, Camilla.
Yeah, it does make sense that if there were any deal to be done, it would be a post-election one once the numbers have been crunched, rather than anything involving people standing aside in seats and all the rest of it, because, as Nigel Farage has said, the Brexit Party was burned that way in 2019. Do you think that Reform can grow further from, I think you're currently on about 25%. Obviously, for Reform to govern on its own without the help of the Tories or anyone else for that matter, that vote share needs to begin with a 3. It probably needs to be 34, 35 at a minimum. Do you think you can do that over the next 4 years? And how will you do that? How will you broaden your sort of appeal so you can win over not just Tories but also Labour voters?
I mean, I agree, we need to, and we are doing, actually. I mean, what I find remarkable, I think we only saw it briefly during Brexit, where we could pull from the left as well. But with Reform, it is remarkable on the ground, Camilla. I've seen it myself when I'm campaigning. Reform's ability to pull from both Labour and Conservative. And we've seen it in the recent council by-election results. And I think the election's what's left. We know that obviously Conservatives and Labour have been colluding to cancel a lot, and they've cancelled a lot. But the ones that are going ahead, it's going ahead in Lincolnshire. These are important elections because I think it's a true test of what Reform can do and how we can also pull off Labour.
But it is very difficult for Reform because Nigel Farage made those promises actually when you were unveiled as a Reform mayoral candidate, saying, you know, it's all about the local elections, we can get hundreds of seats. And now that opportunity to sort of flex your muscles in May has been taken away. How damaging has that been for Reform?
I think it's been purposely taken away, actually, by the two main parties colluding, and I think that's pretty bad and it's undemocratic, actually. But look, there's these elections. We've got a good chance in Lincolnshire, touch wood. We've got a good chance in the Hull and East Riding election for mayor. And don't forget, the next stage after that will be the elections in Wales to the Welsh Assembly.
I was just thinking, as I'm speaking to you, because we were covering the Andrew Gwynn story earlier today, I appreciate that you're going for a mayoral position, but actually we could be facing a by-election in Gorton and Denton. If Andrew Gwynn can't go the distance, that would be a seat that I would assume Reform would want to fight. Would you like to re-enter the House of Commons? Maybe you should put yourself up if there is a by-election in that area, Andrea.
No, I'm committed to standing to Mayor of Lincolnshire. You know, I've got roots there since childhood. And do you know, it's actually be better balancing it as a mum on my own with a 7-year-old being in one place. That's much easier. But, I mean, could we touch briefly on the Chemist plan for migration as well?
Yeah, sure. What do you think of that? Because I asked Andrew Burghart about it. The CPS, the Centre for Policy Studies, has calculated that it will cost taxpayers £8,200 if all of these migrants currently given 5 years are allowed to indefinitely remain. That means that they get passports. It's not a bad policy from the opposition leader, is it?
Look, I mean, what I find quite disingenuous, though, Camilla, is that, well, first of all, they're only bringing this out. I mean, look, 4 years away from election, have you ever known for the leader of an opposition to be bringing policies out? So I do question the timing of it, and especially policies where Alex couldn't answer the fine detail. Secondly, the fact that some of these policies the Conservatives already did, Camilla. I mean, this 10-year qualifying to indefinite leave to remain, the Conservatives already introduced. Clifford, shush now, please. Just take this, please. Right. Sorry.
We don't mind seeing Clifford. Andrea, we can see Clifford if he wants to come on. Don't worry at all.
Right, just I'll find it in a minute. Just shush now, right?
You see, this is the perils that I appreciate, Andrea, of trying to do telly. I once had to lock myself in a garden shed to do telly when my children were younger, so I know exactly where you're coming from.
So the thing is, the Conservatives introduced this qualifying period of 10 years, indefinite leave to remain, back in 2012. And it affected the vast majority of migrants. When Pretty was Home Secretary, Camilla, she also included this indefinite leave to remain route for refugees, extending that to 10 years. But this created such a workload for the Home Office that they couldn't handle it. So the Conservatives abandoned it in 2023. And let's face it, it's not much impact. So they're just, I think what they've done, they've seen the figures, they're rehashing a policy which is already there, which is very disingenuous. But what's the policy to stop people coming here illegally? You know, I mean, people are going off the grid to work illegally. Only in Spalding this week, a car wash was found to employ illegal migrants. So I just don't think what they are doing is actually addressing anything.
Well, the Tories will argue it was the Rwanda plan, which obviously Labour immediately scrapped. Final question, Dame Andrea, because in terms of kind of senior management of Reform, you've made it a little bit more diverse from a gender perspective. I was speaking to Reform people about this only last week. Does the party still have a bit of a woman problem? Don't you need a few more prominent right-wing women at the helm of the party? It's quite blokey, isn't it? What can be done about that?
Look, I mean, look, people said that in the Conservative Party at one point, didn't they? But look, no, I'm not a feminist, Camilla. I'm a meritocrat. I wouldn't care whether the whole cabinet was men. All I want is people who's capable. Yes, if we can attract more women, which I know conversations have been had, then fantastic. But I don't think it's about competence, and we've got good people at the top of the party who are competent.
All right, Dame Andrea Jenkyns, I'll let you get back to little Clifford. Lovely to see you this morning. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's hard to do these interviews on a Sunday when you've got kids in the background, not least if you're a single parent, so thank you very much indeed to Andrea there. Coming up, I'm going to be speaking to Britain's strictest headmistress, Katharine Birbalsingh, about her ongoing row with Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary. Stay tuned, we'll be back in just a moment.
Hello there, very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. There are some glimmers of sunshine around first thing today, but for many it is still rather cloudy, all due to the easterly wind that is setting itself back up, filtering in quite a lot of moisture from the North Sea, and that's providing quite extensive cloud cover, particularly across eastern areas where we will see outbreaks of rain and drizzle at times. Generally, though, if you're further towards the west, you've got a greater chance of seeing some sunshine today, particularly for northwestern Scotland. It's going to be another fine, lovely day here. Western areas of Wales, down towards Devon and Cornwall, the Scilly Isles should also see some sunshine at points today. But that easterly wind is going to continue to feed in that cloud, and so sunshine will become increasingly limited later on in the day, and we'll see some longer spells of rain arriving into southeastern England later on as well. Temperatures on the thermometer will be around 6 to 8 degrees Celsius, but again we've got to factor in that easterly wind that is going to make it feel colder than these temperatures will show on the chart. Across northwestern Scotland, where we do hold on to the sunshine, certainly it will be a nice fine end to the day, but underneath the clear skies that hold on tonight, it is going to turn quite chilly. Again, there will be some frost around, maybe some freezing fog patches as well. And elsewhere, where temperatures do get close towards freezing, there could be some very localised icy stretches where surfaces remain wet and untreated. But for most of our towns and cities, temperatures will be around 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. As we start off this new working week, then, it is going to be a fairly dull, damp, dreary one, unfortunately. Again, a lot of extensive cloud cover right across the board, continuing to see some showers push their way in from the east. They'll be wintry over higher ground as well. It's always going to be western sides of things that will see the best of the sunshine. Again, northwestern Scotland probably seeing the best day out of everywhere. Temperatures really struggling though, 4 to 6 degrees Celsius. Again, we've got to factor in the strength of the wind, so it's probably going to feel closer towards freezing, and that is going to continue right throughout the forthcoming week. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
Welcome back. Katharine Birbalsingh, who's the headmistress of the Michaela Community School in Wembley, joins me now in the studio. Lovely to see you, Katharine, if you don't mind me calling you that.
Yeah, sure.
Rather than Miss Birbalsingh, which you must hear a lot at school.
Yeah.
Now, you've been in a war of words, so to speak, with Bridget Phillipson.
Yeah.
You had a meeting with the Education Secretary. You didn't find it particularly satisfactory. You then wrote an open letter, which was published in The Spectator, detailing why you don't think that Labour's legislation, its plans to reform schooling in the UK, is fit for purpose.
Yeah.
You have then been briefed against, and I'm just going to put some, let's call it Labour source briefing against you to you, and you can respond about this now infamous meeting. It was apparently an appalling meeting. You were twice told that you had to contain yourself. Your conduct was apparently utterly disgraceful. She had a tantrum, basically. What's your response to that?
Well, that's just not true.
I did interrupt her, but it was me and my deputy, and both of us were asking various questions. We weren't willing to be fobbed off. So that is true. We weren't very deferential in the way that, it was obvious that they, and I say they because there were 4 of them, that they were trying to get the time to tick along, and you give platitudes to my questions, and you do it deliberately. Come in and speak to us about the nice things about your school. No, oh gosh, it's so fascinating. My deputy spoke about the fact that we more or less matched the number of 9s that Eton got last year. We got 52%, they got 53%.
Result. Progress 8 score, the highest in the country for 3 years running.
So my deputy spoke about that. At no point did she say, gosh, that's fascinating. Tell me about your teaching methods, or what are your values like, or what kind of behaviour systems do you have? There was no interest at all in what we were doing.
Why do you think that was? Because you've accused her of being a Marxist. I mean, what are you backing that up with?
Well, what I mean by that is that she's trying to centralise all the power in the state. So at the moment, academies have freedoms to be able to do what's right for their particular intake. With this new bill, we will have those freedoms taken away from us and returned to the centralised state. So that's what I mean when I call her a Marxist.
And what would that restrict you doing if that happens, if this children's wellbeing and school bills is passed? What will you be restricted in doing?
So, for instance, the pupil admissions number that you have in any one school, let's say I have 120 kids. Let's say one of the local schools, not very good, also wants 120 kids, but they haven't got as many. They'll make it so that they'll reduce the number of places in a good school to increase the number of kids in that other school. And I said to Miss Phillipson, of course, well, what are you going to say to the mum who is desperate to get her child into a good school and you've reduced the number of places? But she didn't have any response. It's interesting because at the meeting I also asked her which of the top schools she's been to visit. She wasn't able to name a school. Since yesterday, bizarrely, somebody on Twitter sent me an FOI that they'd done asking which schools she's visited, because she said it was a matter of public record. And of course, I haven't been able to find that. Someone sent it to me. She hasn't been to a single one of the near 100 schools that got over +1 at Progress 8. So there are practically 100 schools she could go and visit, all brilliant schools. She hasn't been to see one of them. So all of these school leaders who are up in arms right now and very upset about what's going on because they know, for instance, Clause 44, if that goes through, it will stop right now the automatic reform to academy status that a failing school will have. And what that does is it allows a big trust to come in that has the reputation of turning around failing schools, to take over that failing school and to replace the failing school leaders with new management.
Yes. Sounds like a good idea.
This is a good idea. And it's worked beautifully because, of course, in Wales and Scotland, where they do not have the freedoms that the academies have here, they have done extremely badly in terms of the international PISA tables and the Pearls tables. We have moved up in England, so much so from 27th to 7th in maths. We're now top of the Western world in reading. So the fact is that we've done very well in England. Wales and Scotland have not done because they don't have those same freedoms. What Bridget Phillipson's going to do is remove those freedoms from the academies here to make us like Wales and Scotland, which is just crazy because we will plummet in those international league tables.
I mean, you've said that she, quotes, hates academies because she has in the past voted against kind of the academy system and academisation.
Yes.
Are you saying...
Yeah.
So go on.
No. And that's the case. She's always voted against it. Actually, the Prime Minister ran on an anti-academies ticket. That's what he did, you know? So the fact is they have always made it very clear they're against academies. She's now saying she loves academies, while at the same time removing the freedoms from academies that make an academy an academy.
You could counter-argue your point by saying, well, autonomy's great if it's a head like you and you're really efficient and successful. What if it's a bad head? You don't want them to have too much autonomy. Maybe the government should take more control.
Yeah, but you know what the freedoms are? They're little freedoms, like being able to use uniform in such a way to be able to turn around a failing school.
Yes.
Like freedom to be able to hold on to my 120 kids and not have them taken away from me.
I mean, the idea that the unions sort of back this, I was looking at it in the week and I was thinking to myself, you're quite a threat, aren't you, to bad teachers who are protected by the union system. It's actually, if you were of a socialist persuasion, you'd look at Michaela and think, my gosh, if Birbalsingh can turn this school around, what excuse does any school have in the country not to come up with these results? It does hold a torch up, doesn't it? You're a beacon of good teaching, quite clearly. Your results show that. It also makes bad teachers look really bad. Is that a problem?
But I mean, look, this really isn't about our school. Frankly, the things that I'm arguing, I'm shocked by the fact that they've abolished the Latin for Excellence program and taken away their funding. We don't even offer Latin at Michaela. The advanced maths program that has put extra maths teachers in the classroom and that has got 50% more kids taking maths A-level. These are things that I have not participated in, but I'm arguing for them because I feel sorry for those head teachers out there who are desperately trying to do right by their kids, who are tailoring their curriculum, tailoring their uniform, making sure that they are able to hire. For instance, she wants a bureaucratic stamp of certificate on all teachers who are teaching in our system. Fact is, I find it very difficult to find music teachers. 3 years I had a music teacher who came to teach with us, who was the wife of one of my maths teachers. Sure. She was a lawyer. She would never have come to teach with us if she'd had to go through the process of getting that bureaucratic stamp. She taught us for 3 years, did an absolutely brilliant job, and then went off and is now a wife and mum. I mean, the fact is that we need those freedoms to be able to give a bespoke and tailored offer to our communities. My school is not the same as a school up in the Cotswolds, as in the Lake District, as in Hull, you know?
So it's tailored education to a tailored set of pupils in a certain extent.
We are the school leaders. So we know what's best.
Yes.
And I understand...
What she said, she said, you know, basically, I don't need any lectures from anyone on the importance of a good education for disadvantaged children because I've lived it.
That's
She's
right.
referring there to having been brought up on a council estate, gone to a comp, but ended up at Oxford.
And so that quote, which I find so shocking, I mean, and this isn't reported by me, this is from them. They say they don't need any lectures from school leaders. So what they're saying is, she's been to school, she knows enough, get lost, we're not listening.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I found in that meeting.
Yes.
They were not listening. And so, yes, I did interrupt her, and maybe I deserved detention for that. But the fact is, we were told very clearly, you've got 30 minutes. And then they were behaving in such a way, and I say they, you know, staring at us, being horrible to us, you know, refusing to give us water and so on. I mean, the fact is that they had a particular agenda that they needed to fob us off. And I wasn't going to be fobbed off.
No.
I wanted to know, because I'm fighting for our kids here.
Yes.
Right? Across the nation.
On that note, because I've got somebody in my ear saying we've only got a couple of minutes left, let's just talk about something positive. Tell us, what are the top 3 secrets to a successful school?
And only she'd asked that. If she'd asked that, how brilliant that would have been.
Tell us now.
Okay, so... to turn around a difficult situation in your school, you need uniform. You start with uniform, broken windows theory, just like they turned around New York with the subway cars and taking the graffiti off. It would take me a long time to explain. Then you need to have excellent teaching methods in your classroom. The teacher needs to be in charge, needs to be the authority there, and there needs, third thing, are the values that you're teaching your children. I'm always talking about small c conservative values. Now, obviously you pick and choose, depending on the situation you find your school in, because every school needs freedoms to do what is right for their children. But those core 3 things, if she'd asked me about them, gosh, I could have spoken for ages. She never did.
And final question, asking not just as a journalist, but also as a mother of 3. Screens in schools.
Well,
your thoughts, please.
No. And not even screens at home, really, until 6, 7, 8 years old. And even then, restricted where you are watching them. It needs to be supervised. Honestly, they are so dangerous for children. In 50 years, we're going to realize what we've done. Please tell your listeners and your viewers, please, please, please keep your children off the screens.
But when it comes to the classroom, then, this whole idea, everyone should have a Chromebook.
No.
So how do you do it?
Well, we don't have Chromebooks. We do writing, you know, on paper. So children learn how to hold a pen and learn to get... Look, you're more likely to remember your thoughts if you're writing them down. You're more likely to think critically if you're writing stuff down. That's just been proved by studies. And the fact is that when you have kids on Chromebooks in classrooms, they are not working very hard. There are reasons why we do so well in our exams at GCSE. It's because of a whole bunch of things, but one of them is because we don't have screens in school.
Wow. And are you going to re-extend an open invitation to to the Education Secretary to come and visit Michaela?
I did at the end of the meeting, and I did at the end of my letter. I'll keep on extending that because I'd like her to see, a school that works. But you know what? If she doesn't have to come, she doesn't have to come to us. There are 100 other schools out there with amazing Progress 8. She could go and visit one of them.
Do you know what? I wouldn't mind spending a day at your school. Maybe we bring some cameras if the parents and the pupils were agreeable and have a look at Michaela ourselves.
Yeah, we'd love to have you.
All right. Thank you very much, Katharine Birbalsingh. Coming up next, I'm going to be speaking to the business leader, Sir Rocco Forte, about the impact of Rachel Reeves's budget, what it's having on small and medium-sized businesses, and I'm going to be appealing to you to tell me your stories. Have you been affected badly by the budget? But first, if you're in search of some winter sun, then here's the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
You may well be thinking of escaping the cloudy skies of the UK and heading to the Mediterranean, though it is rather mixed out there at the moment. There are some heavy showers and thunderstorms across parts of Malta and Sicily, though recent snowfall across the Alps should hopefully help with some skiing conditions. Perhaps the most settled conditions across parts of southern Iberia, Portugal and Spain, though there is some showery rain pushing into parts of Madeira as well. Generally, it is going to be the west that holds on to the most settled conditions during this week as well.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Lauren, let's start with this, shall we? How children's TV may be harming, not helping young minds.
Yeah, so this is an article in the Express today, a big double-page spread as a result of some new research in a new book that's coming out by a child psychologist, saying that children's television, and I think perhaps more importantly, the way that children consume television and video product now is perhaps not as healthy for them as we would hope it would be. And there's quite some distance from children's television of the past, of the sort of the Bagpuss and Clangers and Ivor the Engine era. And I think what's interesting about this is particularly the how children's television is consumed angle, because children are now put in front of screens significantly more often than they were, certainly when I think we were growing up. The content that they are consuming is not great for their brains and their learning and development, which Floella Benjamin of children's television fame is now leading a big crusade to say that some of this is really, really bad for children.
These days, they're not watching the TV that we all watched when we were growing up. They're not even watching GB News in the morning.
What are they thinking?
Would you believe it? But they are watching this absolute drivel all day long on YouTube, and because obviously all our TVs are now connected to the internet, or they're getting TikTok on their TV. It's not even, so they don't even necessarily have to have smartphones or iPads. They can just watch this stuff on TV, and it is rubbish. They are watching it and they're obsessed with it. Oh God, Skibbity Toilet or something. Have you heard of this?
No.
No? Well, you'll have viewers who have got who are parents of sort of 13-year-olds, and this Skibbity Toilet thing is, they're all obsessed with it, and this is a really annoying sort of theme tune or thing that they sing at you.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News. Business leader Sir Rocco Forte joins me now. He's the owner of the Balmoral in Edinburgh, Brown's Hotel in London and several others. Sir Rocco, lovely to see you this morning. Thank you for your time. How's your business faring since Rachel Reeves's budget?
Well, my business isn't typical of most British businesses, is that 90% of my customers come from overseas. And so I'm not dependent on the UK market. Obviously, it's increased the costs of my business in the UK by about £1 million. I'll have to take some action in relation to that, which in my case will mean that I was going to introduce some better pension benefits for my employees. I won't be able to do that now.
Did you say £1 million, Sir Rocco? Because the connection is a little bit ropey. £1 million
I said
added
£1 million, yes.
Wow. And will that affect how many people you recruit as well? Will you freeze your recruitment? What else might happen as a result of having...
It won't freeze my recruitment. It won't freeze my recruitment. What I was saying is that it will... I was going to increase pension benefits for my employees. Yeah. As a result of this, I won't be able to do it.
When you speak to other business owners...
That's how I'm going to recover that £1 million of costs.
When you speak to other business owners, particularly SMEs, because we hear about very big businesses, but I don't think we hear much from SMEs on the ground, how challenging has it been for them since Labour took over?
Well, all you have to do is see the economy came to a complete halt. Before the budget, with all this sort of bad mouthing of the economy that was going on. And secondly, with the impending tax increases, people have already started reacting in business. Vacancies and businesses have dropped. Staff are being dismissed. And generally speaking, it's been very bad. But I mean, it's been bad in all sorts of ways, because it's not just the national insurance increase and the big jump in the minimum wage. It's also a surcharge on oil companies, effectively stopping drilling. That is going to damage jobs significantly. It's a big area of employment, that. And effectively, the oil companies are now withdrawing, they're ceasing to invest in the UK. Of course, the non-dom change in the non-dom rules has accelerated an exit of wealthy people from the country, yes. People who are investing here and spending money. And that is a continuing trend. It's just started, although last year the numbers leaving doubled from the previous year.
Yes.
And a lot of young people are leaving, going to Dubai even, and Australia and New Zealand instead of remaining in this country. People who are very productive, who are very inventive, and entrepreneurial. The very people we need in this country are being driven out.
The Bank of England this week halved its forecast for growth. It's taken it down from 1.5%. Yeah. Do you fear a recession, Sir Rocco, finally?
Well, I think it could. I mean, a recession could be coming. It's very difficult from the figures are always a bit delayed. But I mean, we're already almost. We've had several the odd month of negative growth already, and we have to wait to see the figures are revised. If we have recession in 3 consecutive months of negative growth, we'll have to see whether that comes through. But technically, but in reality, we're in a recession or close to recession.
Okay.
So it's not a very pretty picture at all. And we haven't seen the worst of things with Angelina's Labour laws, which are going to come in. They're going to create a lot more bureaucracy for business, which again makes businesses should be concentrating on their customers and making money for their shareholders, not all these sort of weird and wonderful ideas that politicians dream up, which have no support in the country, but they create a lot of extra cost and use up the use of valuable time, which people could be spending on driving their business forward. So that's going to have a very bad impact. And of course, they're going to let the unions run riot with this new legislation, and we'll start seeing what we saw in the 80s again. And probably the railway unions will be able to become effectively, have the same effect as the miners' unions had in the 80s, because they control, effectively, railways are important to the economy. And if you start having huge strikes, that will affect the economy very badly. This government has no...
We need to leave it there, I'm afraid, Sir Rocco, but finish your point.
No, I'm saying this government doesn't understand that you've got to create the right environment for business to thrive. And you do a bit of pump priming as well in the areas where you want to promote more business. This government is doing the opposite. They're taxing business very, very highly. They're making it more difficult for business to operate. They're splurging money into things like an unreformed NHS, which is only going to get worse. I'm willing to bet that by the end of this government's term, the NHS will not be better. Everybody recognises that the NHS needs reform, and no one wants to do anything about it.
So
then on
Rocco Forte,
education, the same thing.
We have to leave it there, but thank you so much indeed for your time and your thoughts. Lovely to speak to you this morning. Thank you. Well, joining me now, a little bit briefer than we had planned, is former Defence Secretary and my fellow GB News presenter, Michael Portillo. Michael, looking resplendent in red. Can you give me the rundown of your show in 30 seconds, please?
Right, in 30 seconds. Well, we're going to be talking about Dominic Cummings, who's now admitted that he and his friends got rid of Boris Johnson. What should be the role of those who are political appointees? On Tuesday, it will be 50 years since Margaret Thatcher became leader of the Conservative Party. I'll be reminiscing, having worked for her in opposition and in government, with Sir Malcolm Rifkind. A lady called Jill Samuels has made a most moving film about October the 7th, and she spent a lot of time with the families of the hostages. I think she was in Israel at the time of October the 7th. And on a much lighter note, it is National Pizza Day. There's a pizza on a mural which was discovered in Pompeii, which was destroyed by a volcano in the 1st century AD. So pizza has been with us quite a long time. It's a food that should certainly be celebrated. I intend to do so today.
I've been told I've got a bit extra time, and therefore I need to ask you a very, very important question.
Yes.
Where do you stand on pineapple on a pizza?
I think it is a crime that ought to be investigated by the International Criminal Court.
As ever, I don't need to tell you to get off the fence, Michael Portillo. I'm glad you have given us your view with crystal clarity. If only all of the politicians who appeared on this show were as straightforward as you in answering straight questions with straight answers. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you chomping on some pizzas in just a moment. Now, we spoke to Rocco Forte there. I am getting the growing impression that a lot of you are struggling if you're running your own business. So I want to hear from you if that is the case. I'm getting the impression that a lot of people are considering whether they continue with their businesses. I think a lot of people have been landed with very hefty bills by the budget. So I do want you to get in touch with me. I actually want to showcase your stories. How are your businesses doing post-budget on my show? So please do email gbviews@gbnews.com with the Camilla Tominey Show in the subject line, and therefore we are going to be able to tell stories from the front line. Maybe you run a business, maybe you run a shop, maybe you've got an online retailing business. Whatever it is that you're doing, we want to hear your post-budget stories, please. Do get in touch. I'm going to be back next week at 9:30. As you can see there, Michael Portillo in a red suit is coming up next to eat pizza and discuss important political and cultural matters. Do stay tuned for him. He'll be up at 11. See you soon and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather updates provided by the Met Office. Some of us are still going to be hunting for that sunshine today, though there are a few glimmers for a lucky few of us. We've still got high pressure out towards Scandinavia that is feeding in this easterly wind across the UK, and because it's coming in from the North Sea, it's bringing in a lot of moisture and a lot of clouds. So particularly for eastern regions today, it is going to be widely cloudy, grey, dull and drab, unfortunately, with some outbreaks of rain that will be falling as snow, particularly over some higher ground areas. If you are a little bit further towards the west, you've got a greater chance of seeing some sunshine today. So particularly areas of Cornwall, the outer city, potentially parts of Pembrokeshire as well, should see some brightness in there. But for a lot of central eastern areas of England and Wales, that rain will be pushing its way in. But actually for northwestern areas of Scotland,